This is the How Did We Get Here podcast with your host, Nancy Jackson.
Hello, everybody. This is Nancy Jackson, and I will be your host today for our podcast called How Did We Get Here, which is the attempt to connect some dots and figure out what's going on in our world of politics, education, government, culture, and religion. And I have a special guest with me today who's going to give us a lot of information about what's going on in education. It's Dr. Mary Byrne, and Mary is an educational consultant and a national speaker about education and issues regarding the Common Core state standards and critical race theory and social emotional learning. She co-founded the Missouri Coalition Against Common Core in 2013. And since then, she's been working to educate legislators and school boards and the public about the fundamental transformation of the American educational system under progressive administrations. And I met Mary at a dinner, with a conference that we both attended. And I ended up seated next to her. And I thought she was so interesting and she had so many good thoughts and information that I really wanted to have her come on my program and explain in detail everything that she's been doing. So it's taken me a while to chase her down and get her on this program, but I'm delighted to have her today. And I'm going to turn the microphone over to her and let her give you a longer explanation about all the good things that she's been doing to fight something that is really threatening a lot of people. And I know we hear about it on the news every night. Parents who are struggling to try to figure out what's going on in the schools, where their children are just, well, anyway, I'm going to let Mary explain it. So anyway, here's Dr. Mary Byrne.
Thank you, Nancy. Feel free to jump in if you have any questions as I'm talking, and we'll just approach this in a conversational way. Sound good?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay. I think first and foremost, what we have to understand is that the federalization of education was not the conception that the founders had. National education systems in Europe already existed. Our founders deliberately did not put education in the US Constitution. They believed it should be a local issue and that parents should be in charge of their education. Thomas Jefferson in particular is known as the education president, and he conceived of what he called the natural aristocracy, as opposed to the birthright aristocracy that they had in Europe. The natural aristocracy was the common man who had natural talents to contribute to community, society, and to individual development. And the idea of public education was that the content of instruction was not for workforce development. That is a Rockefeller idea, okay? The original intent of public education was to preserve the republic by preparing citizens with literacy so they could read for information and engage with their government to basically preserve their own freedom. To do that, you had to to have the knowledge that had been reserved for the upper class in Europe. But the conception was everybody would receive that information here. So that's called liberal arts, for liberty. It's not for liberal excess. It was as opposed to the manual arts, which was for workforce development. So in this country, we were all aristocracy in Jefferson's vision. And that aristocracy meant the individual was sovereign. So all of this interfaces with their idea of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It was Lincoln who articulated that eventually in the Gettysburg Address. But the point was the people had to be educated to preserve their own liberty. When, after the Civil War, John D. Rockefeller's money was used to create a system focusing on the South, and in particular on keeping freed slaves in the South on the farm, literally in agriculture. The idea was that the money would be used in forms of grants in order to prevent a whole new segment of the population from joining the unions in the North and upsetting the industrialists and people of wealth who were profiting from this enormous new aspect of culture, and that is corporations. And John D. Rockefeller in particular was infiltrating into the federal government through the Department of State in order to globalize his market, which eventually his grandson, David Rockefeller, would do with Chase Bank and the banking system. This all goes to say that the Rockefeller agenda for globalization, for workforce development, started well over 100 years ago. And it has been the legacy of the Rockefeller foundations, the Rockefeller money, and the Rockefeller family to continue in that agenda. Most recently, I wrote an article for the Education Reporter Online, a Phyllis Schlafly publication, and detailed how it is David Rockefeller who created an organization called the Trilateral Commission. After his brother Nelson failed 3 times to become the Republican nominee for president, David Rockefeller formed this Trilateral Commission and groomed several people, and I say progressive administrations, not Democrat or Republican administrations, because the Republican, George H.W. Bush, was a part of this sequence. It was Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, who were in the ground level at the formation of the Trilateral Commission, and all of them became presidents of the United States, and all of them became critical to implementing the Rockefeller agenda for nationalizing education. Jimmy Carter did it with passing legislation for the formation of the U.S. Department of Education. George H.W. Bush became instrumental in his administration of introducing the ideas of standards and accountability. And it was Senator Lamar Alexander who became George H.W. Bush's Secretary of Education and later went on to be chair of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. That's HELP. Okay, meaning lifelong involvement of the federal government from cradle to grave, and including your education in the, I should say, federal involvement in education to produce a worker for a planned economy. And that was George H.W. Bush. So this Lamar Alexander and Bush legacy went on for decades. They were Republicans, but they were part of this transformation away from liberal arts towards workforce development. And then the third presidential candidate groomed and then elected for the transformation of education was Bill Clinton. And where the infrastructure was put in place to nationalize education with Jimmy Carter and George H.W. Bush, Clinton actually had a huge part in the transformation of the content of standards used throughout the country for educating students. The content was changed from, you might say, the liberal arts academics to workforce development. And that's what we have today. And all governors that maintain workforce development, whether Democrat or Republican, are complicit in this transformation. So I want to impress listeners saying this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. They are all participating in basically the demise of the original concept of American education. And again, it was meant to be local. It wasn't meant to have a U.S. federal level Department of Ed. All of them continue the participation of the demise of education and, in fact, our liberty for this merger of education and labor to a planned economy, which is socialism. So there have been several members of Congress, including most recently Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who filed a bill to eliminate the Department of Education. And the elimination of that department started, or the agenda to eliminate it started with the Reagan platform. But in 1980, as soon as Carter put it in place, Reagan's platform was to undo it, to eliminate it. But it was Republicans in Tennessee who were in control of the Congress who said, no, we're not going to reverse what we just did. So I want to impress people. There's no halos on any party, okay? And this is not a fight between parties. This is a fight of globalist elitists in both parties to undermine what the founders had envisioned for freedom and the preservation of liberty through education. And it can be undone, but in my opinion, the critical piece in beginning the reversal of what's wrong with education in this country is the elimination of the U.S. Department of Ed. Through that department, money flows from Congress to the states, and there's always conditions attached to money. So when that money flows from the Washington, D.C. Beltway into your state capitals at your state departments of education, then there are conditions placed on that department for ensuring that your local school districts comply with the conditions that originated in Washington. So all you need to do, or all the elitists need to do, is take control of a very small geographic area, that's Washington, D.C., lobby with money and influence there, and they affect the entire country down to the classroom throughout the United States. And that's been ongoing. And the only reason they can do it is because there is a U.S. Department of Ed.
I want to stop you for just a minute. I have some questions. You've mentioned some things that are may not be familiar to people. And one is the Trilateral Commission. Mm-hmm. But I would like to take a pin, and then we'll come back and resume this.
Thanks for tuning in to the How Did We Get Here podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and share this episode with your friends and family. For more information and to connect with Nancy, email howdidwegethere1884@gmail.com.